moving process is we're camping out at our new house. Our belongings are on a moving truck somewhere, and they have been for over a week now.
Oh no.
Our truck's supposed to come tomorrow. So when I was like getting ready for this, I just felt really frazzled, and I do kind of feel that now. So I thought maybe we could just start with like maybe 5 minutes of just running the energy.
Sure.
And just that we have the intention that our conversation is going to be inspiring. We're going to cover what needs to be covered, and we're going to speak in an honest way that really reflects the nature of the energy and the work that we do.
Perfect.
Okay. Awesome. So let's just run the energy for like 5 minutes. I'll keep an eye on the time, and then hopefully that'll put us in a good space to do this.
Okay, great.
Okay. that's been about 5 minutes. That was lovely. And then partway through, I kind of transitioned and I was like, you know what? Maybe I won't edit this out of the podcast. I'll just leave it in. And then I was like sending to the people that are going to be listening to this that amongst the chaos of their life, they can just be present and be present for this.
Yeah. I always create a sacred space, especially when I'm doing distance work. And so create the sacred space and then allow for all the good stuff to happen inside of it. And it was interesting as I was creating this bubble. Sometimes I work with angels, and there were like angels landing on the outside of the bubble the whole time. And I'm just like, oh, this is new.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, then I also just felt very grounded. Which brings me, okay, yeah. So I just saw your post on social media. So why don't we just jump right into that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been doing quantum touch for about 10 or so years now. And I just finished studying at the Brennan School of Healing. And when, we always like pick practice partners. And most of the time, if somebody is not grounded, I'm the one they're going for.
So let's start with, what does it mean to be ungrounded, or how would you know that you're not grounded?
Well, usually if you're not grounded, so for me personally, the first clue that I am not grounded is that I'm in the kitchen looking through the cabinets, looking in the fridge, and I'm not hungry. And I'm just, because I need something. And I don't know what it is that I need. Now, when I catch myself doing that, if I take a moment and stop and spin my chakras, like they teach us to do in QT1, there's a huge shift in the way that I feel, and I can just close the doors and walk out and go back to whatever it is I need to do. So that, if you're daydreaming, if you're working on something, but your brain is working on something else. And, some people, I've had clients who just literally don't want to be on Earth. And so in order to even be able to help them, it's important to bring them energetically back into their bodies so that you can allow them to feel the work being done and allow them to know that it's safe to be in their bodies. Because as children, a lot of times when we didn't feel safe, we would just like energetically just whoop, and go somewhere else where we could protect our energy selves, even if our physical being self was in a scary or unpleasant situation. And that gets to be a habit. Just reminding people that, well, you chose to be here. And there's a purpose for you in being here that you need to figure out and you need to do. Being in your body is the easiest way to accomplish that.
Right. So then what steps do you do to help people come back into their bodies?
It just depends. A lot of times if I'm working with a client, either distance or physically on the table in front of me, I will just hold my hands at their feet. And energetically, I will go and I will grab their toes and I will just slowly and gently bring them back into their bodies, reminding them the whole time that it's safe and that I am here with them. They don't need to be worried about it. They don't need to be uncomfortable. Let's just try this and see how it feels. Yeah,
I was going to say, what do they normally feel then? Are they able to notice that?
Some people are and some people aren't. It just depends on how in tune they are with their bodies. And, I've been studying and doing this work for more than 11 years, and I usually still don't feel it if someone is doing distance work on me. So it's not, it doesn't mean that it's not working and it's not doing something if you don't feel it. And I think that's a question that a lot of people have, was like, well, I didn't notice anything. Well, that's okay.
But then that comes back to, and this is one of the things I love about quantum touch, is right away with the breathing and the sweeping that we learned within the first couple hours of the workshop, we're bringing the energy into our body physically, like we're bringing the awareness into our body. And I find just doing the hands-on sweep is grounding. So if I feel very scattered or just not present, then I will do the physical sweeps just to help bring that awareness back into my body.
Yeah. And that's another great way of just becoming present.
Now, do you think this is why sensory stuff is just become very popular? So different kind of feelings.
You know, my kids went through Montessori when they were younger. And one of the things that I remember they do in Montessori is they teach them cursive starting in kindergarten. And what they did was they would cut out the letters in cursive, and the children would trace the letters with their fingers.
Oh, cool.
And it was on sandpaper. So you would get the texture of the letter embedded into your fingers. And so I think there's a lot of, the sensory things that we might be overlooking that could be really helpful for people.
Cool. So you've been doing quantum touch for about 10 years. Can you tell the story of how you got started with quantum touch? Because that is just so fun. And I think it really speaks to how like the energy will just appear when it's meant to appear.
It certainly will. Yeah, my story is really kind of out of left field. I was at this metaphysical event where they have people selling jewelry and crystals and doing tarot cards and all this kind of stuff. I had never been to one, and I was supposed to be helping work a booth. So I'm like, okay, and we got the booth all set up, and then they're like, well, we don't really need you right now. Why don't you go look around? And over the loudspeaker, there was this, in 5 minutes, Tom will start speaking on energy and stones. And I'm like, okay, that sounds interesting. I'll go for that. And I went in and I listened to this lecture about stones and energy, and he like gave us stones to take home with us. And afterwards he opened up for a Q&A. And this lady a couple rows in front of me raised her hand, and she's like, I'm considering a new job. What should I do? And I'm thinking to myself, that is like the stupidest question. Why would you ask somebody you don't even know a question like that? And so he gave her the answer, and I raised my hand and I asked the same question. Now, at the time, I had no understanding of channeling. And so he was tapping into his guides and he was channeling their answers. And I was a little concerned because it took a significantly longer time to get my answer than the other lady. And finally he said, you just like stuff to be done, don't you? And I'm like, yep. And he's like, quantum touch, next. I'm like, what? So I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget what it was. Came home, found the website, went to the bookstore to order the book, because this was like pre-Amazon kind of stuff, and got the book. I don't learn best by reading, but I got the idea. And then I discovered that there was the online course. So I took the online course, but our internet system was so it was buffering. And then Richard would say a few words and then it would buffer again. And it was like, oh my God. So finally I went back on the website and I'm like, well, maybe I can take this class somewhere. And lo and behold, somebody 30 minutes from where I live was teaching, took the class, and it was like, wow. About 2 months later, somebody was teaching a level 2 class. Now, for me, that was too fast to go from level 1 to level 2, because I didn't really get much of a chance to practice with the level 1 stuff. Level 2, my mind was just like, wait a minute, what is all this stuff? So it was, everybody has a different path. That was my beginning.
So then you became a practitioner. So then why become a practitioner?
Well, I was kind of at the point where, I was kind of getting into it and it seemed really interesting and I liked what I was able to do with it. My dog was my practice client for a lot of this. Mm-hmm. And then Sandy Hook happened. Mm-hmm. And I knew that we are being taught something that can help anyone on the planet. Mm-hmm. And even if I don't know the person or know what's going on, I can support the community when big disasters happen. Mm-hmm. It was at that point where I'm like, okay, I can either keep playing with this or I can get real and learn a lot and get deep. And so I'm like, okay. And also there was incentive because they were changing the requirements for the program. Mm-hmm. It was amazing because every hour more that I got in of practice, it just expanded so much and I learned so much.
That's so cool. And now you're studying with the Barbara Brennan School of Healing.
I just graduated from their
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So I keep hearing about that because I know there's a lot of practitioners who've done both. So I guess how do they compare?
To me, quantum touch is like learning first aid. Mm-hmm. You get all the basic skills, and even if you don't practice a lot, you've got those skills to use. Mm-hmm. I think one person in every family should learn quantum touch. Mm-hmm. Then you go to the Barbara Brennan School of Healing, and it is wider and deeper.
Okay.
So, we take anatomy and physiology, all the trauma stuff, all the emotional stuff. It's a lot broader. They've got 10 schools worldwide. The Florida school is the only one that you can get a bachelor's degree at, though.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. So it's a Bachelor of Science degree. Did
you do yours through Florida?
I did go to the Florida school. I did not do the bachelor degree program because I already have a bachelor's degree. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to have to do all the extra classes. But there are things that I use from both when working with a client because they're in my toolbox. Mm-hmm. And whatever the client needs is what I pull out for them. Mm-hmm. So I think they're both useful.
So when a client books with you, they'll just book an energy healing and then you'll intuitively use whatever tools you feel is best for the client.
Correct. You have to have 3 clairs in order to graduate. Mm. And like I said at the beginning, I saw the angels landing on this ball. Mm-hmm. I don't see, I know. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that they were landing on it. So that's one of my primary things. So I'm hoping to get to the point where I can see energy. When I do guided meditations, I have the format written out and I know what the client has asked for. Mm-hmm. But basically what I'm doing is channeling. Mm-hmm. When I do my healer's prep, I bring in my guides and angels. Mm-hmm. And then as I put my hands on my client's feet, I invite their guides and angels in, or anyone who chooses to support the client with whatever they're going through at this moment. I can't know everybody and I can't know who would be the best support. And like I had a client a couple of weeks ago who it was a little girl and this dog came running through. I'm like, so when I finished the session, I texted the mom, do you guys have a brown hyper dog, a large brown hyper dog? And she's like, sent me a picture of this dog laying in the middle of their living room. I'm like, that's the one. And, I think it's to a certain degree, stuff like that happens like as a confirmation because the mom had not met me before I did this work. I mean, we'd had some phone conversations, but me specifically talking about that dog, I think helped comfort her in knowing that I knew what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And then there's other times where I was working on somebody and I was smelling like pipe tobacco. I occasionally get the sense of smell. And so afterwards I was talking to her about it and she's like, oh yeah, that's my Indian guide. She's, she's Native American. And like, okay. And it's fun when you get that confirmation back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you kind of add that into your meditations as well?
I do. I work with healing clients, and then I also create guided meditations. Currently, I work with people who are going through chemo or IV therapy, and I create personalized meditations for them and for their situation. I'm working on a more generalized one that anybody can use. Again, I have kind of an outline of the process that we go through in that meditation, but based on what the client needs or, what their desires are. For example, one of the questions I ask before I create the meditation is, do you have any guidance or religious figures or whatever that you want brought into this? And I think sometimes people think that, oh, that kind of stuff is new age and they're going to make me do whatever they are. No, it's, being a practitioner is serving the client where they are. And so if somebody wants God or Jesus or Mother Mary or an archangel or their grandmother who has passed or their dog who was their favorite creature, and they want that person or entity in the meditation to support them, that's who I bring in.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So how did you get started with that? Was there a particular client who had asked for it?
So I started this kind of in my third year at the Brennan School. There was just something about that year that brought forth that guided meditation is a primary teaching tool in the Brennan School, and I think in most energy modalities. A friend was going through cancer, and I really wanted to help him, and I'm like, what can I do? And I was like, oh, well, maybe I can do this. And so kind of played around with it, not really knowing a pattern yet, and just trying to figure out, well, if I was in that situation, how would something serve me the best? So basically, when I create these meditations, it's all about being grounded right where you are, being grateful, and looking at the illness or issue not as something that's attacking you, but something that's trying to communicate something. Taking it and going, I acknowledge you, I see you, and I appreciate you being here, and now it's time to go.
I had someone once explain it to me like an unwanted thing as like a dinner guest who kind of overstayed their welcome. Like you're not going to be rude, you're going to be polite, you thank them for coming, but it's really time for you to go now.
And I think, I got some of this. My mother had throat cancer 20 some years ago. She had gone to the Chopra Center to do an advanced meditation study before she started her radiation treatment. And I just remember saying, she was looking at the cancer cells and acknowledging them in the meditation and then just letting them march on out of her body. And that, I think that kind of stuck with me. We worked with in the Brennan School is pain. And most of the time when we are in pain, we either try to close it off and squish it or push it away. And the way we were taught there is to acknowledge it and allow space for it. Because when you give it space, then it can more easily dissipate.
That's really cool. And I know if I am to create a meditation, I like infuse it with energy. Like I'll run the energy before I write down kind of the theme of the meditation or the points that I want. And I really stick with the idea of like, we're working in the quantum realm. So I'm going to infuse this meditation with the energy so that whenever you're listening to it, you're going to continue to experience that.
Yeah.
And then like what you say about the pain being there, and because I find a lot of times when we start doing this deep healing work, it's like all of those beliefs and thoughts and feelings that no longer serve us are going to surface. And then it's like you can either attach to them and say, yes, that's who I am and it's true. Or you could say, no, that no longer serves me, that might have been true in the past, but it's not true now, and I can let it go. So I remind clients, when all that stuff just comes up, you don't have to hold on to it. You can just let it go.
Yeah. Well, and it's, when we're kids and stuff happens, we find a way to stay safe. And we keep that. And as we grow in adults, we don't necessarily recognize that we made a decision when we were 3 years old that the best way to stay safe is to hide or to be in the background or to, draw attention to ourselves by being noisy so that somebody doesn't hurt our siblings or, and people don't recognize that. So when it comes up for recognition, it's just like, oh, and acknowledging that that was really important then, because our child understanding is nowhere near our adult understanding. And we can look back on it as a way of, that was really a good decision at that moment in time. And now it's no longer the best choice.
Do you find that inner child healing comes up with your clients, like past moments in their life that they've been holding on to?
A lot of times, yeah. It's interesting. There's an exercise in Quantum Touch, the timeline exercise. And I found it really fascinating because the way I do it, I create a ball of energy and I run somebody's timeline through that. And I just say, age 1, age 2, age 3. And when I feel a sticky spot, then I know that's a time that we need to stop and give that time some love. And oftentimes when I ask the client, what was going on at age 4, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's, when my brother was born or when my parents got a divorce, and they'll remember something. And it's just, for me, when doing that exercise, it's just, let's send some love to that time period. Let's get, it was like one lady, she was like 7 or 8, and she had leg braces put on for the first time. And that was like a horrendous trauma for her because she wasn't walking easily and the leg braces were awkward and all that kind of stuff. So, sometimes you don't think that it's a big deal, but to that child version of you, it was huge.
That's really cool. And I like how it's such a simple way of doing it too. All right. And then I saw that you have a book on your website called The Smart Girl Revolution.
I do.
Can you talk a bit about that?
That was a group effort. There were, I think, 12 or 13 of us that got together right before COVID and right around COVID. And we decided that it's tough being a smart girl. And every author in the book decided that they weren't going to be okay with going the normal route. One of the co-authors, she went into the military and then that didn't work out, so she went into police work. And so being a woman in a male-dominated field, for me, I was what was referred to as doubly gifted, which means I have a really high IQ and I'm dyslexic. I've also in the past year recognized the fact that I'm also ADHD. So when you have someone telling you, why can't you study? Why can't you, get organized? Why can't you, learn your math problems? And it's, my brain works differently. And so when both of my sons wound up being dyslexic, I'm just like, okay, I have a choice. I can acknowledge it or not acknowledge it. We can bring it out in the open or we can hide it. And we chose as a family, just this is our normal. You don't learn like everybody else, and that's fine. You get the opportunity to say, I don't understand, or I need some extra help, or whatever. And so having my son's experience being very different than my experience was really important to me. So Smart Girl Revolution is kind of a fun book. It's, everybody has a different story. Some of the women in there are, in their 50s, some were in their 20s. So it's a very wide range of, who we are and how our life experiences just chose to kind of reveal who we truly are. And I think that's why I became a healer, because I don't learn well in a normal classroom. But when I get to, when I was becoming a practitioner for Quantum Touch, we had to go to 4 classes of level 1 and 2 classes of level 2. And that is the best way for me to learn, by doing. And then we had to work with clients. And again, learning by doing is so important for me. Brennan was really tough because even though it was learning by doing, there was a lot of writing papers and doing a lot of reading and stuff that I was not good at. But because I had the background in the healing and knew some of the stuff to a certain degree before I got to school there, that kind of helped me balance it out.
And this is what I love about the energy work is you're really just discovering who you are. And at least I've noticed with every client is the energy session is always going to be different. I mean, sometimes I think, okay, I normally always start at people's feet and I kind of center their whole body. And then I think when I started, I was like, okay, first I'll do the chakras and then I'll do the hips and I'll work my way up the spine, right? Like I felt like I had to have a protocol. And I always ask people, I'm like, what's your protocol? But it's nothing. I start at the feet and then I just move from there, depending on what is most important to that client. And I think that's one of the things I love about it is Quantum Touch gives us kind of like this model to follow, right? We breathe and sweep and we have some tips and tricks that we can amplify the energy, but really you just kind of go with what's going to be best for the client.
Yeah. I've done some free events, and at one of them there were like 3 or 4 different people that had sciatica. And I started in the same place on each person and then went totally different directions.
Wow.
Because everybody needed something different. And that's why I think that the aspect of creativity that is in energy healing is so important. Because we learn, like you said, all the tricks and tips and all the tools, and then we see where the client's at, and then we go, oh, let me try this, or let me pull this out, or let's do this thing.
Yeah, because sometimes you work with a client and you could be like in one area for the whole time. And then other clients, you feel like you've done everything like 5 times over and it's still only been 30 minutes. And you're like, where? It's really working outside the realm of time, which is really cool.
Yeah.
You're talking about creativity, and that reminded me because I always see you posting sewing stuff on Instagram. And I love that. I'm a sewer. Once I hope to get a sewing space set up here. But yeah, have you always sewed?
I actually have not. And one of the things about the Brennan School is that one of the requirements is that we do an art project every year.
Very cool.
So my art project for this year was to sew my dress that I was going to wear for graduation. And I kind of had an idea of the basics, but that was a big project in terms of learning how to work the machine and, read the instructions, because you really can't do those out of order.
Yeah.
And then I took a couple of beading classes to do some embellishments on the dress, and then I was like, I kind of like this. This is fun. I'm going to keep going.
Did you finish the dress?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I wore it for graduation.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
So what is the connection then between healing and creativity? Why would they have put that in as a requirement?
Well, I think it's, like you were saying, you have this toolbox and you just need to be able to pick and choose and express yourself. One year for my art project, I actually had an office, and I had a feng shui consultant come in to help me set it up. And every single person that came in that office was like, wow, this feels really good. And so for me, learning how to create the sacred space of a physical space was important to translating it into the ball that I work in when I do distance work, because I create that as a sacred space and then invite the energy of the client to come in to that sacred space.
That is so cool. Maybe I should get somebody to come help me with my house, because I believe it. I walked into a really old mill and the lady had created it. It was a shop and she had some of our art stuff, some repurposed stuff. It was like a vintage vibe shop. And I used to walk through it. And finally, one time I said to her, I was like, I don't know what it is, but it just feels so nice in here. And then she's like, black tourmaline. She's like, up on every post. She's like, I have it there. And I was like, interesting.
Yeah.
But I remember just telling her, I'm like, I don't know what it is, but I just feel really good when I'm in your shop.
Yeah. I used to work at a garden store, and after it was brand new in my town, and after they hired us all and we started the training and everything, they revealed the secret of how and who they chose to hire, and it was they chose the people that were the friendliest. And so you have all these friendly people with good energy in this shop, cedar walls, potpourri at the entrance, all the plants, all the orchids, all the beauty. And people would come in to our shop in the middle of winter just going, I just needed this. Because it was such a contrast to the cold yuck that was outside. And it's, being able to create those kind of spaces that are intentional, I think is it's an offshoot of being a healer. Because you look at that who you are and you're doing the work on yourself. You're looking at supporting the clients in a particular space. And then you start casting your eyes about at the other places that you live in and go to on a regular basis. Like both my sons are in college and they're going to be moving to new places next month. And they're going to roll their eyes when I say to them, why don't you choose to set some intentions for your new place? What is it that you want this place to offer you, and what are you going to offer this place?
It's powerful.
It is. My youngest will kind of go, all right. And my oldest will totally ignore me. But, it gets them into the mode of being intentional about who they are and what they want. Like my oldest, he has a landscaping business. And he got to the point where he said, Mom, I only want customers who appreciate the work that I do. And this was from like a 19-year-old. And I'm like, that is huge, baby. You know that you have worth and value. Wow. So what we do rubs off on our children.
Well, and that's so cool about just how you can be intentional in your life. I was going to add in about the sewing, and because I think it's so important. I find it's very grounding to have a craft or something I can physically do, because I feel a lot of this work I just spend up in my head and I'm breathing into my body, but I need like physical projects to work on. And then exactly, it's something tangible. And then I just find it always puts me in a happy place.
Yeah.
Like I remember in high school, I started sewing purses and bags. and I forget what year, maybe it was grade 12. I sewed a different one for each month. So then I had like my monthly themed purses. I remember being up till like midnight or something because I'm like, it's March 30th and I need to get this purse done or whatever, right? But it never bothered me that I had to stay up that late because I enjoyed it so much. And then going off to university, and then once I got married in our new house, like I just didn't have, my mom had an awesome sewing space. So like I was all set up when I lived at home with them, but I haven't had that space back again. So I'm excited to create my own space where I can create again because it brings me so much joy. So I got really excited when I saw your sewing stuff because I'm like, I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think creativity is just so important in any field. And it's really funny. There's a local group that I belong to called Creative Juice, and it's primarily artists. A few others of us have snuck in. To me, it's always fun to go there because I see the different kinds of work they do. Some are sculptors, some do paint, some do oils, some do watercolors, one of the ladies used to work with the Muppets. So it's just being in that environment of people who are creative that's really important and exciting. But like my son who does landscaping, I'm like, well, why don't you come to some of these meetings and, meet these people and kind of check it out? And he's like, Mom, I'm not creative. I mow grass. I'm like, but you take an incredible amount of pride in your work. And when you do landscaping, that's artistic. You should see our backyard. Because he has totally redone our backyard and it looks amazing. I think a lot of people can deny their artistry or their creativity if they feel like they have mundane jobs.
No, you need creativity in everything.
Well, even when I was a lunch lady for an elementary school for a couple of years, there were some personality issues the year before. And then I came into this space. And it was amazing how the teachers and the parents would be like, it feels different in here. The woman that ran it before me, she was very brusque and she would yell at the kids and kids would drop their trays all the time. And so when I took over, if we had like 2 trays that dropped a week, that was a lot. It doesn't matter what job you do, you can take the energy that you have and imbue it within your environment. Even the last job I had at a bakery, when I put in my notice, the owner was like, it always feels different when you're here. Because people know it, they don't always recognize it enough to say anything or to have it come to the surface to realize what's different. But we spread the grounding, the being present. It shows, even if not everybody recognizes it.
Well, and I say that to my clients too, because it's hard to describe. I'm like, you just need to feel it and experience it.
Yeah.
And I have this one good friend, and I kind of started telling her about what I do with quantum touch. And she's like, ugh, I can't. She's like, I just don't get into all that energy stuff. She's like, I don't understand it. I don't have time for it. And I was like, okay, like I didn't press it either, but I'm like, you always linger around me. Like you said you were going to left 30 minutes ago and you're still here chatting. And you said you really have to go because you're busy. You're still here. But I'm like, right, you don't get the energy. I got it. Yeah. And I'm like, that's okay. When the time is right that we can explore that, we will. But until then, I do enjoy your company too.
Yeah, it's fun.
Any last words or thoughts? I loved how we talked about the sacred space. Because I think your son doing the landscaping, he doesn't realize it, but he's creating sacred space.
He is.
Well, he's that intentional already with the clients that he wants.
Yeah. He's been gone this summer on an internship. And he's like, how do my yards look? Because he takes care of a bunch of them in the neighborhood. I'm like, honey, it's not the same as when you're here. He's like, I've been working on those yards for like 6 or 7 years and somebody messes them up in 10 weeks. And it's going to take me a while to get them back. I'm like, they'll get there.
Cool. So if people want to reach out to you, how can they find you?
Well, my website is lynnsullivan.com, and that's Lynn. So they can reach me on there. They can find me on Facebook, on, let's see, Instagram. I am Energy with Lynn.
Okay.
And I just started TikTok.
Mm.
Haven't posted anything yet, but that's Lynn_A_Sullivan.
Perfect.
So
now you'll have to post stuff on TikTok.
I know I'm taking a class and learning how to do that so that I can help more people.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today and all of your lovely insight.
It's just like, okay, this can help. Let's do self-care. Mm-hmm. Self-care isn't bubble baths, although for some people it might be.
I know. This is like getting deep.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, Lynn.
Okay. Take care, Thea. Bye.